Good morning, everybody. Bruce Black, Horticulture Educator for Carroll-Lee-Whiteside County, coming to you live from a cloudy Dixon. We had some sunshine this morning, but I think I jinxed that for everybody, so my apologies. We're going to get started with today's presentation, which is big flavors in small spaces. And like last week and the weeks prior, I'm going to shut off my video to save on the bandwidth, because I know that we've got some folks joining us from the countryside where the internet can be a little bit spotty, especially if you are fighting for bandwidth like I do sometimes. So if you could, please keep your video off, and I will turn my video back on when we take questions, so that we can make it a little more interactive. So I'm going to stop my video at this time, and since we had some luck with some polls last week, I did modify it again this week. So I wanted to start off with just an easy poll, one question, and you should see that pop up on your screen. And it's simply asking how you are enjoying the series for growing horticulture in the Northwest, Illinois. So that poll is live. So if you guys could answer and click submit, it will pop on my screen, and we're already up to 80 out of 115 people. All right, so I'll give another moment here for last answers, and then I will close the poll. I'm going to see if we can break 100. We're at 98. All right, so I'm going to share the results with everybody. And it looks like we have 62% of our respondents who are enjoying the webinar series. And I'm happy to see that 0% said that it's not my favorite, but thanks for the opportunity. All right, so we will continue on, and we'll have a couple of more polls as we go. So today's presentation, as I said, is big flavors in small spaces. And this is container grown fruits. This is my new program for the year. Before everything happened with COVID-19, I was able to give this presentation a couple of times before in person, before we had to go to webinar presentations, and I thoroughly enjoyed presenting this. It's one of the topics that I believe is going to become more and more popular, and it is already become one of the things that's caught the industry's attention. So the horticulture industry and plant breeders have been focusing more on these container fruits. And so we'll talk about that as we go on. So our outline for today's presentation is to give you a little bit of a background on why I developed this presentation. And then we've got 6 container fruits that I'm going to talk about. These have been the ones that have either been around for a while, or they've had recent introductions in the consumer market lately. And then, of course, the question I always get is, where can I buy these plants? you're giving me all these great details about plants, but where can I buy them? So I've got a slide on that as well. When we get to the where to buy them, those are in no way recommendations of where to buy them. They are just where I have found them. Since we haven't been able to get to the garden center, I'm not sure if our local garden centers have those available at this time. All right, so our introduction and the reason for more container fruits being produced and developed is that in recent years, as gardeners have started to downsize their properties, limit their garden space for various reasons, due to either limited ability, limited time, or the shift towards living an urban life. But the one thing that's remained constant is that people have that desire for fresh grown produce, especially fresh grown produce that they have grown. I know when I've talked with folks, they are really, really interested in growing their own produce for many reasons, specifically for the fact that you have more control over what it's grown in, where it's grown, what products are put on it, as well as you can just walk outside into your backyard or down to your local community garden plot and harvest that produce at the peak moment of freshness. So in response to this size trend, the horticulture industry has been releasing new cultivars of blueberries, strawberries, blackberries and raspberries, as well as apple trees. And so one of the terms on the screen that I should explain, just for those that might not have a gardening background, the word cultivar means cultivated variety. And this is a type of plant that has been selected for a specific trait or set of characteristics that separates it from other members of that species. So when we talk about some of the plants today, I will give you either cultivar names or trade names, and I'll tell you why as we go forward, why it's a little easier sometimes to say trade names. So one of the big questions that I get right about this time is, okay, you're going to tell me all these great things about how to grow these container fruits, but how much time is it going to take before I can actually get that produce? So many times with our fruit crops, it's going to take, depending on the species, it could take 5 years, it could take 2 years, it could take 7 years. With our apples and a lot of our container fruits that we have listed here on the board, we are actually reducing the amount of time that it takes to get fruit from those plants. And the reason is when we plant our fruit crops in the ground, since they're perennial crops, they come back year after year, we usually have to give them a longer period to establish themselves and become well rooted so that they can continue producing fruits for us for multiple years. In the example of blueberries, when we put those in the ground, we have to wait 3 to 4 years before we can start harvesting produce, but we're sacrificing those 3 to 4 years because blueberry bushes that have been planted in the ground have been shown to last up to 60 or 70 years, depending on site selection, cultivar, and management practices. So with our container fruits, we don't actually have to establish them as much because we just have to get them acclimated to the pot that we put them in or the container that we put them in. So for our apples, instead of waiting about 5 years, we only have to wait about 2 to 3 years. Blueberries and strawberries, we have to wait 1 year. And then currants and figs, about 2 years. So the other question that I always get is, are those winter temperatures still necessary? Because when we grow plants in pots, usually if they are a perennial plant or one that we would like to overwinter, we either have to give it some shelter or we have to take it inside for the winter. So with our fruit crops, it is actually necessary for those winter temperatures. We have to have that exposure to temperatures between 32 degrees and 45 degrees Fahrenheit necessary throughout the winter to get fruit the next year. And some of you may be familiar with the term chilling hours. That is what we are talking about here. The 32 to 45 degree temperatures are those chilling temperatures we need. Since we are in the Midwest, we have a lot of folks from Northwest Illinois, as well as Iowa, Minnesota, and Illinois. We do have those temperatures during the winter below 32 degrees. So since we are growing them above ground, we do have to give them some protection. And this can come in many forms, which we'll talk about in a minute. But the reason we have to provide this protection is because we're not taking advantage of the geothermal heat that our fruit crops would normally get during the winter months by growing in ground. So since we're growing above ground, we have to provide that protection because they're going to be exposed to wind, chilling temperatures, and just have to protect from that. So getting back to our topic of chilling hours, this is a great site that I recommend that everybody bookmark, especially if you are growing fruit crops. So this is a chilling hours calculator, and this is one of the things that I absolutely love about technology. So for our fruit crops, we have to hit a certain number of chilling hours for them to produce fruit. So between that 32 and 45 degree time frame. Well, before technology and computers, this was when somebody had to track the temperature and write those down in order to calculate the number of hours that we got for chilling requirements. Thanks to technology, all of the weather stations collect this data automatically. So using this website, which is getchill.azurewebsites.net. This calculates our chilling hours for us. And so all you have to do to utilize this website is put in the nearest weather station ID. And if you're not sure, right here, there is this link to MISO West. And you can type in your zip code, and this gives you the local weather station closest to your zip code. And so I used the zip code for our office in Sterling, which is 61081, and got this station ID. This is for the Whiteside County Airport. And I just put those station numbers in. And then I pulled for 2019 data. So I put in the date of November 1st, 2018, and then put my end date as April 1st, 2019. So for this, I could go out to our last spring frost date, which for Northwest Illinois is May 15th. I could have put it out that long. Usually what I pick is the first day in November and the first day in April, just because this is one of the dates for the last spring frost average. So when I say May 15th, I'm using the 90th percentile, and April 1st is one of the other percentiles. And then once you have this information, you click the Get Chill button or Calculate Chill button, and this may take a minute or two because it's crunching all of the hourly information for November through April. And you can see down here at the bottom, it gives you different models that you can use to calculate chill requirement. The 32 to 45 is the one that we use. And so it's hard to see with the background from the website. So I put it up here. We had 1,344 chilling hours for the 2019 growing season. So this means that all of our fruit crops that we grow in Northwest Illinois had enough chilling hours to produce fruit. Depending on the crop that you are growing, it is going to depend how many chilling hours they need. And as we go forward and talk about specific crops, this information will be talked about. So for our apples, we're usually looking at about, depending on the cultivar, between 1,200 and 1,500 hours. So this is our cold weather protection section. And I just have to say, I love this picture. And I'll tell you why in a minute. So for our cold weather protection, this is where we're trying to insulate that container. And usually when we get enough snowfall, we have time, or when we have enough snowfall, we don't have to provide as much insulation as we need. So some options for wrapping your container or providing that insulation. For those that are familiar with floating row covers, like we use on cucumbers and squash, it's a white mesh that goes over the plant in a hoop type structure, and it prevents insects from landing on the plant. Well, those same companies make a heavy duty version of floating row cover that is used for insulation. And so that is one option. You can also use bubble wrap to create an air layer around your plant. You can utilize foam or styrofoam as well to put around your plant. I've seen some people also use insulation. With insulation, you do want to be careful that it is asbestos free. So don't use any old insulation. And then if you are like me and you have a family that gives you blankets all the time, whether they're making it or for Christmas you get a new blanket every year, this is a great way to reuse some of those blankets or some of the old blankets, and you would just put these around or over the pot. And so please, nobody tell my mom that I use those blankets like that. But back to the picture here on the screen. I found this when I was looking at some old pictures about insulation or wrapping plants. And so if you look at this plant, this picture was taken in, I believe, the 1890s. And so this is a concept that's not new. But I love this picture because it demonstrates their ingenuity. So we've got a ruler here with some butcher's twine. And if you look at the wrapping, this is actually butcher's paper. And so it looks like it's a couple of layers thick, but what they did is they used butcher paper with some twine and a ruler for some support to insulate this plant that would either be outside or was in a part of the house that was cold during that time. And I just noticed one of the questions that came in is, do you cover the whole plant or just the pot? And for most of our plants, we are going to be wrapping the pot or the container. And the reason for this is, since our plants are perennial, we want to protect those roots first off. So that they don't freeze. And when we get to strawberries and the blackberries and raspberries, we want to protect those underground structures so that they don't freeze as well. And so another mulch that we can use, or another insulation we can use, is mulching on top of those plants. And so yes, the bottom of the plant would also be covered. All right, so let's go ahead and start talking about our fruit-specific plants. And at this time, I want to throw up another poll for us. And so this one is, are you currently growing container fruits? So I want to take the pulse of our audience and see if anybody is growing container fruits. So this could be container apples, strawberries, blueberries, blackberries, even some of those crops like aronia berries. And so we'll give it another couple of seconds here. All right, we'll go ahead and end the poll and I'll share the results. And so for our question, are you currently growing container fruits? 54% of participants today are saying no, but they want to. And we've got about 16% of our participants that are currently growing container fruits. Very interesting to hear. So we'll start off with one of the best loved fruits. And I say that because apples being grown in containers is one that is not a new topic. So in Europe, these columnar apple trees have been grown since the 1950s. They're also called ballerina trees, and they were bred from a natural mutation that was inherited from the Macintosh Wheatcheck apple. So this was one of those things that started to, people were taking trips to Europe in the 1950s and 60s, and they were seeing all these apple trees on people's properties. And so they started coming back, and people in the United States were like, why are we doing this? And so in the United States, one of the popular apple series has become the urban apples. And so these were developed in the Czech Republic. They are hardy to zone 4. And so just like our columnar or ballerina trees, the urban apples have an upright, narrow habit where you are growing your fruit right along the stem. And so for our mature columnar apple trees, they're ranging in height from about 7 to 10 feet and only have a width of about 2 to 3 feet. And that's going to depend on the cultivar. Some available varieties are Golden Treat or Tangy Green. And one of the traits of these columnar apple trees is that they have one central leader, so one trunk and one major branch going up through the center, and then off to the side of this trunk, they also have small branches where the leaves come off, and then fruiting spurs where these apples are produced. Because of this tight habit, it makes them perfect choices to be planted in containers for gardeners who have either downsized or are looking for patio plants. With very similar to our in-ground varieties, they do require cross-pollination, so you will need at least 2 varieties that are compatible with each other to get a total and complete fruit set. And when I was doing some research into these columnar plants, they do have plums also in this columnar habit. And so from the picture here, you can see these are about 7 to 8 feet tall, and they are fully loaded. So these fruits are going to be the same size as a fruit that you would get off an in-ground tree. The only difference is with a in-ground tree, you're going to be able to get more apples produced off of them. For the columnar apple trees, because you're going to have a reduced number of fruiting spurs, you're going to have less apples produced. And so if we look up here at our requirements for our apple trees, they only need 15 inches of soil to fully grow to maturity. And so you can see that these apple trees here are just grown in plastic pots. One thing I do recommend when doing any container fruit is begin with the end in mind. So a lot of our fruit crops are not going to like to be transplanted. So begin with the end in mind. So have that final sized pot picked out for you to start growing these in. So for these, they're only a couple of gallon, the pots are only a couple of gallons in size. They're about 15 inches deep. And so when you're looking at your pot size, you want to have a little bit more than the minimum soil depth. And the reason I say that is with these columnar apple trees, they do get 7 to 8, 10 feet tall. If the wind comes through, they can be a little top heavy. So it's a good practice on the bottom of these plants to either put a brick in there, put some gravel to help weight those pots. If you don't want to put the brick or the weights in there, you can buy a pot that is going to be heavy enough that it's not going to tip off if the plants sway. All right, moving forward to our blueberries, blackberries, and raspberries. This is the new collection that has been coming out more and more every year. In 2016, 2017, and 2018, a lot of new container varieties have started coming out. So what that means is a lot of the extension side, grower side research has yet to be done. And so for this part of the presentation, I am relying on information that I did get from the Raspberry website. And so Raspberry is a collection that comes from the breeding team at the Fall Creek Nursery in Oregon. And this is a nursery that's been around since the 70s and is one of the world's most successful berry propagating food retail nurseries. A little background on Raspberries. The varieties are based off of some plants that have been bred in northern Germany. And so for those that know northern Germany, it is very cold there. And what is great about that for us is we have very similar hardiness zones. And so these raspberry plants do have a built-in bred cold hardiness. And so just again, as I mentioned at the beginning of the presentation, when I talk about specific breeders or plant distributors, these are not recommendations of places to go. These are simply the places to get the new information on these container crops. So with their recent introductions, they have been focusing on the blackberries and raspberries. So we'll get started with container blueberries. And container blueberries have been around for a few years. There are other varieties that are out there and other distributors as well. So I do invite you to do your research. The information that I have here on the left is information that is for all container blueberries or all container raspberries or blackberries. The pictures and the cultivar or trademark that I'm showing the picture is pictures that I've borrowed from the Raspberry website because, as I said, new topic, new research that the public sector has to do on these. So blueberries have become one of those most sought after fruits for people in the Midwest. And the problem that we tend to have is our soils are not acidic enough to grow these plants. If we look at the map of where the commercial blueberries are being grown, we'll see the West Coast, Oregon, Washington, California, the East Coast, as well as Michigan, all have perfect soil conditions to grow blueberries naturally in their soil. For us here in Illinois in the Midwest, we have to do a lot of amending to our soil. And so we have to get our soil down to about a 4.8 or a 5.2 for our pH. So that's a very acidic soil. Locally, our soils range from about a 5.5 to a 6, or sorry, about a 5.5 to a 6.5 in pH, which is good for a lot of the vegetables that we have. So what we have to do to grow our blueberries is we have to add acidic organic matter like peat moss or pine needles, sawdust, wood chips to acidify the soil. Or we have to add sulfur to acidify the soil. And the easiest way to test your soil pH is to take a soil test yearly or every couple of years, and in your results for what your nutrient conditions are, they will test your soil pH as well. Now, if you just want to take your soil pH, one thing you can try is going throughout your garden, taking some small core samples, mixing that into a bucket, adding some water, preferably a distilled water, because depending on your home water source, if you have softened water or if you're using city water, that water could be basic on the pH scale. So using a distilled water will have a neutral pH of 7, and adding that neutral water to the soil, you can use those test strips that you use for aquariums or for hot tubs, and that will give you a good estimate of what your pH is. It won't give you an exact pH, but what it'll do is give you a good enough example or a good enough estimate of what your soil can be. And for our blueberries, because we're growing these in containers, it's easy to modify the soil that we're putting in. We're starting with a potting mix. We can add our own peat moss, we can add leaf mulch, add in the elemental sulfur, and easily modify that soil versus our garden. So this makes it very easy for us. And because of these container suited blueberries, they have been grown and bred to not only be the perfect accent to a patio, because if we look at jelly bean here, which is one of the raspberries, you can see that it's got a nice mounding habit. And when you put it in a pot that's between 18 and 24 inches deep, it's going to have a nice pot to plant ratio. So it gives it a good aesthetic. And with the raspberries, they were designed and bred to not only look fabulous, but they wanted those berries to be the very sweet, delicious berries that you would get from growing them in your home garden if you grew them in ground. And there are multiple cultivars of blueberries available. And for the raspberries, the reason why I'm using the trade name of jelly bean is because the cultivar names are also the patent numbers. So the cultivar name is random letters mixed with random numbers, and it's about 20 characteristics long. So it's very hard to go in and ask for, and I'm just, I don't remember the exact one, so I'm going to use an example. It's very hard to go to your local garden center and say, I want a CV 927 blah, 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 where it's going to be more familiar to say, hey, I'm looking for a container blueberry, and one of the varieties that I looked up or got information on is the jelly bean from Raspberry. Do you have one very similar? And your local garden center employee is going to be able to help you a lot easier. Now, I will also tell you that depending on the distributor, these might have different names, so you'll just have to check with your garden center person. The other thing that is nice about the blueberries, for those that haven't grown blueberries, is blueberries have good fall color with them. So after the blueberries have been produced, you will also have a good fall color for your patio. Now, for those that have grown blueberries or worked with blueberries, you know that you have to prune it um, every year, and you have to have a certain number of canes in each year. Well, this shortens your prune time, so you will prune it yearly after it is established, starting in year 3. And so for this one, you just have to keep equal parts of 3-year wood. So for the first 2 years, you'll just let it grow. And then on year 3, when it starts producing, you'll prune it so that you have equal numbers of new canes, medium canes, and your 3rd-year canes. So it limits your management and what you have to keep track of. Raspberries, this is one of the new ones that has just come out in 2017. So not a lot of information on how it does locally. Again, only needs about 15 inches of soil. It has a plant height of 2 to 3 feet. So compared to the in-ground ones, we are growing at about 1/3 of the height. You will fertilize this in early spring as well as in the summer. And the great thing about these raspberries is if you've bought them from the store, you know that they're very, very short-lived plants in your refrigerator for fruit because of gray mold. With having your container blueberry or your container raspberries on your back porch, you can take those off quickly as you need and utilize them. You'll prune this every 2 years, or every year, and it's a 2-year pruning cycle. So the first year, the canes grow vegetatively, so they just grow leaves. The second year is when they produce fruit. So after they've overwintered, they produce fruit that next year. So the first year, you'll let the whole plant grow vegetatively. You'll let those overwinter for them to produce fruit the next year. And then you will, after they're done fruiting, you will cut those canes back, and then you'll leave the first year, the new canes from that year, up to produce for next year. And another great thing about having them reduced size is these don't require staking or trellising like their counterparts do. For our blackberries, again, we're growing in a minimum depth of 15 inches of soil, and they're only going to get about 3 to 4 feet in height. A very similar fertilization schedule and maintenance schedule as our blackberry, or as our raspberries. With these, one of the great things about these blackberries is they are a thornless blackberry. So you don't have to worry about layering up to go in and prune your blackberries. These have no thorns. They are, again, about half the height of their counterparts and very, very easy to manage. Strawberries are our next one, and this has been the one that strawberries are the #1 fruit that home gardeners grow. It's one that has been grown in pots and raised beds for many years. You need 8 inches of minimum soil, and the plants get about 12 inches in height. Depending on the type of strawberry you grow, if you grow June-bearing strawberries or if you grow the ever-bearing strawberries, you're going to have a little bit different maintenance schedule. For the June-bearing strawberries, you are going to let these grow, and then after they produce their strawberries in June, you will trim them back to the soil line. You'll allow them to regrow, and then overwinter them. You'll put mulch on them. If you grow the ever-bearing strawberries, these you will let grow throughout the growing season, and you won't have that rejuvenation period where you cut them back. Depending on your container size or your raised bed size, you will have the mother plant that you produce, and strawberries like to run. So for this one, we've got our mother plant here, and then we've got 2 daughter plants. And if you are growing in a single or a small container, you can just grow the mother plant and simply come in and cut these runners. If you let them produce and you decide that you don't have enough room for all these daughter plants, what you can do is cut the daughter plants after they've rooted, dig those up, and you can either replant them or you can share with your fellow gardeners. Currants, this is a crop for me that I don't personally grow just because I'm not the biggest fan of currants in their raw form. They're very astringent and pungent. For me, they've got to have a lot of sugar to make the jam, to make them taste better for me. This is one that, again, needs 15 inches of soil. And if you look at the picture here, 3 to 4 feet, and you'll simply prune this every year in a 3-year cycle. So when I say 3-year cycle, it'll have canes that will come up from the ground, and the most vigorous fruit producing ones will be those that are 2 to 3 years old. So similar to the blackberries and raspberries and the blueberries, you will allow these to grow and overwinter. And then after that 3rd year, when they've produced their fruit, you'll remove those and then let the new ones grow. These need to be planted in a full sun location. Since they're in containers, they'll be well drained. And the pH for these required is going to be a 5.5 to a 7.0. So a very normal growing condition that we're used to. When you receive your currants, one of the things that you need to do is, if you're receiving them as bare root plants, you'll need to rehydrate them. And so that's simply putting them in a bucket of water for about 4 to 6 hours to allow those roots to start rehydrating themselves. Before you put them in the water, what you want to do is, if you have any broken or roots that are starting to strangle each other, go ahead and just do some light pruning to fix those, and then stick those in the water to rehydrate them. After you've rehydrated them, then you can plant them. Fig is the next one that we've got, and this one is one that I've not grown personally, but I know a couple of educators who do have fig trees. They grow them indoors. Again, you need a pot that is going to be 18 inches deep, and these are going to get about 6 to 8 feet cultivar dependent. One of the cultivars that came up a lot as a container grown fig, and I apologize for anybody who speaks French and I butcher this name, it's not intentional, it's the Violet de Bordeaux. And this is a black purple fig tree that has the sweet, rich flavor that we would expect for a fig. And with these, the Violet de Bordeaux is cold hardy for our area. And it is self-fruiting, and it gets about 6 to 10 feet tall. The fig trees will thrive in extremes, so heat, humidity, drought. They have good resistance to pest and disease. And one thing that I didn't know until I spoke with Grant McCarty, who is a local foods and small farms educator up in Joe Davies County, he grows figs, and they can be biennial bearers. So usually when we talk about biennial bearing in apples, oh, excuse me, I had a tickle in my throat. With biennial barrels and apples, they produce a lot of fruit one year, and then the next year they don't fruit. Well, for biennial bearers and figs, they actually can produce twice a year. So you'll get one crop in midsummer, and then you will also get a second crop in the fall. Now the fall crop will be a little bit reduced as compared to your first main crop. And for me, that was just fascinating to find out. When we grow our figs, we're going to prune them into a vase shape. So very similar to how we prune a peach tree. And I'm going to go back to the first slide that we have here that I showed you this morning for our outline. And this is a container fig from a Cornell master gardener. Her name is Norma Chang, and she does a lot of container fruits. And I just love this picture because it shows the structure that we're looking for with a mature pear. or a mature fig, excuse me. So you can see, I'm going to try my annotate feature here, and we'll switch to hot pink. We've got our trunk that grew the first year, and then when we got ready to prune to develop that vase shape, it would have started developing some branches, and we it would have developed 4 branches very similar to that. And that's what it would have looked like. When we open it up to that vase shape, we remove one of these branches, and it allows us to get good airflow through this fig tree. And then what we can do is start building a scaffolding for our plant. And when I say scaffolding, we'll have our main trunk, we'll have our 3 main branches, and then as you can see, for our fig, it starts branching off into what I'm going to call the upside down chandelier, because if you flip this over, it'd look very similar to a chandelier. And so we start building that vase shape, or the fruit bowl shape, as it's also been called, to allow for good airflow and allows for a lot more fruit to be produced. And so I show this picture for many reasons. One, because it's one of the best looking fig plants that I've seen, but it also goes to show that container fruit can be grown anywhere in your yard. Looking at this photo, she's growing her container fruits right on her blacktop for her driveway. So wherever you have room to grow container fruits is where you can grow your container fruits. It doesn't have to be in ground. And I wanted to show this slide here because this was the where to purchase and where to look for a starting place for container fruits. So always, I'm a big fan of shopping local and supporting local garden centers and nurseries. So I always start there and then branching out to more of the known garden centers or wholesalers nurseries that are popular and have a reliable reputation. So to name 3, Stark Brothers, Burpee, Rain Tree Nursery, all of these were places that when I was doing my research had these in stock. Now I was doing my research in December for this presentation, and they may be out of stock right now, but there are many others to look at as well. So with that, I also did want to share with you the resources that I used for this presentation. And the big one here that I want to highlight, because this was a recommendation from one of my mentors, is the Bountiful Container, a container garden of vegetables, herbs, fruits, and edible flowers by Stuckey and McGee. This book has a lot of information on growing fruits in containers. A lot of the recommendations for how deep the soil for the containers, Stuckey and McGee have done that research to develop the recommendations that are in their book. I will tell you that those recommendations are national, so it's not going to have a lot of the local specific information that you would normally get from an extension publication. So that is why with this presentation, I've kind of tried to give you some of that local information that we utilize here in Illinois. As I said, this is a new presentation for me, and it's because it's one that I'm very interested in, and I haven't talked to my county director yet, but look at doing some trials for growing some of these container fruits and see how successful we can be and kind of develop that local information source for us. So the other places I used was, of course, the Raspberry website. Burpee, Stark Brothers used our local information, as well as utilized the plant database from the Missouri Botanic Garden. And with that, I do notice that I did go a little bit over. So I apologize for that, and I appreciate you guys sticking with us. I'm going to throw up my contact information here for anybody who watches the recording and wants to contact me for more information, or if you guys have more information as you're looking into container fruits or any topics during the growing season. I will let you know that since we are working remotely, this number here, the 632-3611 number, is for our office. And so since I'm not there, the best way to reach me is by my email address right here, brucejb@illinois.edu. And so with that, I believe we will open it up for questions.
Great. Thanks everybody for your participation. Again, just real quickly, I'm Janice McCoy, Bruce's colleague. And if you're a teacher and need CEUs, just send me your evaluation and I'll send you back your attendance record for that. And Master Gardeners and Master Naturalists, record those in your counties as you normally would. And Bruce, there are quite a few